teacher has the chance to teach a lesson about other lessons and their context to enhance. But what do you suppose our teacher has us do? He skips the lesson and makes us present a digital LEQ. Lection needs historical evidence reasoning that can corroborate and advance a complex thesis that Dr. John P. Irish would admire. Then we drop this screencast like a single that is fire. Student-created screencasts for you to like, subscribe, and share. We know you've had all the John Green and Steve Heimler you can bear. If we have the most views by 10 p.m. Eastern on the 5th day, we earn 500 bonus points, which virtually guarantees an A. Without much more fanfare or ado, we present. Our digital LEQ.
Today we're going to be discussing the effects of the Cold War. So our big idea for this LEQ: how did the two powers, the United States and the USSR, prolong their control during the Cold War? For our contextualization, the global balance of economic and political power shifted during and after World War II and rapidly evolved into the Cold War. The democracy of the United States and the authoritarian communist Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, which led to ideological conflicts and power struggles between capitalism and communism across the globe. For our thesis, World War II diminished the power of formerly strong nations. However, at the time of the Cold War, the two hemispheres used similar methods like proxy wars and alliances to maintain control. Therefore, the extent of this influence is similar in both the Eastern and Western hemisphere. For our historical evidence and our reasoning analysis. Here we have an excerpt from a newspaper discussing the events that happened. Feel free to take a moment to pause the screen and read the excerpt. So one of the ways influence is maintained during the Cold War was through military alliances. One of the alliances formed was the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Formed by Western Europe, anti-communists, this alliance of nations were together against the Soviet Union. In the excerpt from the newspaper, it recounted the events at a NATO meeting. It was discussed that the NATO considered the Soviet military regime to still be a threat. Alliances have been a prominent feature of the international affairs in post-war world. The purpose of NATO was primarily to meet the threat to Europe posed by the USSR. The Eastern Bloc concluded a similar treaty in May 1955 at Warsaw. The treaty establishing the Warsaw Pact was signed 5 days after the Western European Union was established. So motivated by Soviet desires to maintain control over military forces in Central and Eastern Europe, and in response to the integration of West Germany into NATO in 1955, the Warsaw Pact was established. As shown by the previous article, the Warsaw Pact was similar to the NATO. In both cases, these organizations were created to try and bind together one of the two major Cold War blocs in an effort to project strength against each other. Here we have an image from the Korean War. The United States and the Soviet Union both wanted to avoid a nuclear war, which would lead to mass global destruction. Ironically, there were proxy wars, which in turn did lead to many deaths. The image above was from the Korean War. After World War II, the Allies divided Korea into the North and the South. In 1950, the North invaded the South to create a single state under their leadership. United Nations came to the aid of South Korea, and the Soviets provided North Korea with guns and bombs for their fight. The conflict ended in a stalemate, with both countries remaining as a war, except now they had much more casualties. On what new beginnings will Angola embark? More than half of Angolians have never known their country at peace. When swords are turned to plowsaw, will hunger end? Can pumping one's natural resource oil be the means for providing all Angolians with clean water and sanitation? Can diamonds build a ring of schools and hospitals? Such are the visions before you now. With such dreams, Angola can become a great country. It is richly blessed in people and resources. Tonight, it is also blessed with a rare opportunity in the life of a country, Angola, if it so choose, can escape its damaged past and build a new future. So Angola was a multi-ethnic empire consisting of 3 different cultural groups, which you can see at the side. They fought their independence and gained it from Portugal. And after they received their independence, they were in conflict about who would control the area. Each group ended up being backed by other countries, which you can also see by the side were the Soviet Union, the United States, and South Africa. This calling for peace is yet another example of how the Cold War's political ideologies divided countries and caused proxy wars. Here is an image from the Vietnam War. Similar to Korea, Vietnam was divided into northern and southern, with the North being communist and the South under French control. The North invaded the South, trying to free them. The United States strongly supported the South, and the USSR and China supported the North. But in South Vietnam, the war was described as a civil war, but it became a proxy war because of the Cold War powers. As a result, the Vietnamese suffered high casualties in this conflict. So we're back to our big idea: how did the two powers, the United States and the USSR, prolong their control during the Cold War? So take a moment and pause the screen to try to answer the question on your own. Based off of that presentation, you should have gotten 2 main ideas: proxy wars and alliances. Both the United States and the Soviet Union had their own alliances, which were groups of nations that stood together against the other. And through proxy wars, the two countries could indirectly compete against each other at the expense of other countries. So here are our sources for all our historical evidences. And our thematic focus for this LEQ was governance. And that'll be all for this presentation.